Now let's start coding. So the first thing we want to do is attach an event listener to this particular button. And to do that, we first need to capture this particular button in a variable. Now, before we do that, I want to just change one particular thing. You see this particular button, the type is submit. I'm going to change this to button for now because the submit input type has certain side effects and we don't want that. We're going to get to those side effects later, but we don't want that right now. So I'm going to change this to button. That's it. I'm going to refresh and the style changes because of my style sheet. Doesn't matter, but this is what we have. So the ID of this particular button is add button. So I'm going to basically create a constant. So constant, I'm going to just call it add button as well over here because it's a good name. And I'm going to say document dot query selector and then provide the ID of add button. So what this does, so far you already know, it grabs the element with the ID of add button and then saves that particular information or the reference of that information, that node information, to this add button variable. Now this is a variable name, this is just a string. So these are separate. Of course, the names are the same, but because that's ease of programming and naming. So that's what I'm doing. The next thing we want to do is add an event listener to that. So I'm going to say add button dot add event listener, and on click, I want to run a function, right? And just to see if this function runs, I'm going to console.log I was clicked, just to see if this thing is working, okay? So I'm going to now open my console. I'm going to refresh. When I click, I was clicked works. Perfect. Now, the first step is done. The second step is we want to capture the text in the input field, right? And that's what we want to do. So let's do that. So how do we do that? The way to do that is we simply, first of all, select this element and then get the text. All right. So the first step is simply to query the DOM. So the name of this element, let's just call it item to add. That's a good name. And the ID is also the same. So I'm just going to say item to add is equal to document dot query selector, query selector, and then provide the ID of item to add. Perfect. Now we want to grab the value that the user enters over here. And to do that, there's a value property on this particular node that has the value that this particular text field has. So if I simply, when this particular event fires, that's the moment when we want to grab the value from here, okay? So if I simply do over here, item to add and dot value, and I'm going to console.log, let's see what happens, right? So I'm going to save, refresh, and the value is empty because this field is empty right now. If I add some certain value, nothing happens, right? What we want to do is grab the value of the node when this particular button is clicked. So we need to move this from here to over here in the function. So now remove this, save, refresh, and now when I enter certain text ASD, and now when I click this button, this function should run. I do that, and I was clicked. ASD is printed. Let me just zoom this in a little bit. All right, ASD is printed. So this is the beauty of events. This function is not going to run unless this particular event triggers. And at the time of when the event triggers, it's going to capture that value. All right, that's perfect. That's what the functionality we want. Now, so we're done with the first two steps. So I'm going to pause the video here and let's continue in the next lesson so I keep these videos short. Talk to you in the next lesson.